We have to talk about a hidden fault line again today. I mentioned it a few months ago, but more has come out about this now that I really want to let you know, because this is really dangerous, because this hidden fault line could lead to a catastrophic earthquake that would stretch from the US to Canada. Scientists are giving us really serious warnings. So this is really great, right? The west coast of Canada and the US, I'm reporting every day now we have this mysterious bulb the size of Chicago, the land rise that's happening at Yellowstone. Now Cascadia Fault and San Andreas Fault, they found something about what happened in the past with both monsters. I'll put all these videos in the end screen. New fault lines. Oh, the Mendocino Triple Junction is not a triple junction anymore. It's now 5 tectonic plates. So this is also in the end screen. So could there be more shizzy potentially hitting the fizzy? Yes, guys, let's talk about this. So Canadian scientists, this time Canadian scientists, usually we only hear from US scientists, even if it comes to Canada, they have warned that an overlooked fault line, they don't even know exactly where it is, could unleash catastrophic earthquakes across North America. And overlooked or hidden is never good, because then we don't know much about it. And if we don't know much about it, it's even harder to, I don't even want to say the word predict, but get an estimate of what the shizzy could be. So it could, and they're telling us that really blunt, disrupt infrastructure, trigger landslides, impact thousands of people from Alaska to Montana. So they conducted another study by geologists of the University of Victoria in British Columbia, and they published it just recently, and they found, how they call it, that this terrifying feature has been stealthily lying to wait for quite some time, waiting to blast, waiting to do something. So the new study shows that it has been quietly building towards a potentially very large earthquake. And quietly means we didn't realize it doesn't produce many earthquakes all the time, right? San Andreas Fault, well, if we look at that, right, I just reported about this. San Ramon again in this area, Calaveras Fault, Hayward Fault. We know what's there. But this one, if it does nothing, nobody thinks about it or even estimates that something like this is in the ground there. So potentially very large earthquake. That is not good. So state seismologist at the Alaska Earthquake Center has said, quote, "It's one of the least studied fault systems in North America, and that needs to change quickly. Because if that comes as a surprise, oh geez, right? We don't want that." So you can see there's forested area. You can't see a fault line compared to the San Andreas Fault that you see here now. If you fly over it, you don't even need satellite images. You see it. I mean, despite the fact that you see it, there's so many subdivisions right on top of it, right? But what am I to say? What about the supervolcano Cantiflegre in Naples? But this one here, problem, and it is the Tintina Fault. The seismic structure extends more than 621 miles. This is huge. It's large, guys. From the Yukon, from northeastern British Columbia into Alaska. And despite shifting laterally nearly 280 miles in its lifetime, scientists believe that the tectonic, how they call it, not my words, monstrosity, tectonic monstrosity, it was discovered first in 1912, had remained dormant for 40 million years. So you think, yeah, come on, hasn't done anything in the last 40 million years, so let's not worry about that, right? Because unfortunately, it appears there was a fault, and this is a word play, in their intel. A fault with a fault in their intel. Now, of course, technology has advanced and they're using topographic imaging from satellites, from aircraft, and even drones. The researchers have now uncovered an 80-mile section just 12 miles from Dawson City in Canada that has evidence of large earthquakes during the Quaternary period. That's an epoch that was spanning the last 2.6 million years to the present. And you might think, yeah, Northern British Columbia, Alaska, that doesn't affect me if I live somewhere else in Canada or in the US. 2018, there was a strong earthquake in south central Alaska. And you know what happened? Minnesota, the northbound on-ramp for International Airport Road at the Minnesota Boulevard collapsed. So do the math a little bit, okay? So over the past couple of decades, there have been a few small earthquakes of magnitude 3 to 4 detected along the Tintina fault. So not so quiet anymore. But it was nothing that would right away suggest that it's capable of large ruptures, right? But how the scientists word it, I quote them here, the expanding availability of high-resolution data prompted us to re-examine the fault, looking for evidence of prehistoric earthquakes in the landscape. So they specifically discovered glacial landforms that were offset across the fault escarpment by more than 3,000 feet 2.6 million years ago. Offset by 3,000 feet. That's a lot. And others that have slipped over 245 feet 135,000 years ago. So, but meanwhile, the Tintina fault continues to strain at 0.2 to 0.8 millimeters annually. So less than a millimeter. It's not a lot, right? But scientists say that indicates, because it is moving, that a major, and they call it major, seismic event could be on the horizon. Nobody would be prepared at all. And they say, quote again, I read it to you. We determined that future earthquakes on the Tintina fault could exceed magnitude 7.5. Exceed. So this could be worse than the San Andreas fault. That's what we're talking about here. And again, I want to say something else. We now found San Andreas fault and Cascadia fault have triggered each other in the past. Could that trigger the Cascadia fault? I think a lot more research is needed, or vice versa, right? I mean, if the Cascadia fault is triggered, we have a big problem, magnitude 9 plus, right? So, again, scientists are warning, quote, based on the data, we think that the fault may be at a relatively late stage of a seismic cycle, having accrued a slip deficit or buildup of strain. Slip deficit means it's locked and loaded, and if it unlocks, it can create a bigger rupture. And they said buildup of strain of 6 meters in the last 12,000 years. 20 feet, at least 20 feet, that's 6 meters. And they say if this were to be released, it would cause a significant earthquake. Not good. They say a tremor of this magnitude could cause severe shaking in Dawson City and threaten nearby highways and mines, as well as cause landslides in this already notoriously rockfall prone region. And experts are fearing that the fault could trigger severe earthquakes in Alaska's Fairbanks, North Starborough, that have the potential to impact, and now comes the number, over 125,000 people as well as affect critical infrastructure such as the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. Imagine this, guys. So this is not just, yeah, Dawson City. No, this is big. This is really, really big. So some even fear that the tremors could affect regions as far as Montana. Like something, it sounds like, many say, like a sci-fi disaster movie. But imagine this happens out of the blue. Nobody expected it. People there were like, where is this coming from, right? If in California, the big one comes, everyone knows who's the culprit, right? I mean, if where I am right now, I get a magnitude plus, I know what's happening. But there? So this, of course, raises the question that's in the room. How did such a potentially cataclysmic threat fly under the radar for so long, right? Experts believe that it has to do with the shaky data and our distorted time scale, like seismic hazard estimates are informed by historical earthquake records, right? And if you don't have any, then sometimes you ignore it, right? And historical records, they also include indigenous oral histories or info from modern seismic networks that only go back a few hundred years, right? So the new research now indicates that landforms that were 12,000 years old weren't displaced by the fault. That suggests that there haven't been any large ruptures since then. So they're basically telling us it's overdue. It's overdue. So, and I quote one scientist here. He says, we are not good at thinking about things that happen every 12,000 years, right? We're not taking this serious. But if the 12,000 years are up, you should. So, not to mention that the ruptures that can be over 100 miles long, but just several feet tall, are difficult to detect. Previous ruptures in these heavily forested regions, in Canada, for example, right? Without the new topographic radar technology. So they couldn't just, they didn't see it in the past, right? So he says, scientists say, the most dangerous thing is not just that the fault is active. It's that no one's been paying attention to it. Yeah, absolute. Because Canada's National Seismic Hazard Model currently still doesn't recognize the Tintina fault as a discrete quake fault source, but it plans to integrate the findings by the new study in the future so they can help formulate plans to help save human lives and infrastructure. To me, it seems everything's taking longer in Canada. Honestly, I don't want to bash that, but if I have to rely on seismic data, on forecasting systems, on warning systems, I look to the US. I'm sorry to say so, because there you have the information, you have the warning systems. If you're on the coast, you have all the signage, tsunami evacuation zone, you enter it, you leave it, you enter it, you leave it. If you drive along the coastline, and here, I just recently talked to another person in Vancouver about earthquakes. It's a friend of mine, and he's like, earthquake? What do you mean earthquake? I'm like, well, the big one. He's like, which big one? I'm like, the big one. Have you ever heard about Cascadia Fault? And then I saw it. Absolutely no idea that he's living with his family in this earthquake zone. And I said, well, how old is your building? Oh, 1970s. And I'm like, it's not up to codes. Are you prepared? Do you have water and food if something happens? And I started to explain, if the Cascadia Fault ruptures, do you know, we could be isolated for weeks until help comes, because this will zip open the Pacific Northwest. And if the Cascadia Fault triggers the San Andreas Fault or vice versa, even California is doomed. Where is help coming from? So you need to be prepared. And he's like, oh. I said, I'll send you one of my videos so you have to look at that. But he's not the only one, right? None of his family is prepared. Parents, nothing. So That just on a side note, guys. So we really will have to watch that closely, and I thought you should know. So thanks for watching, guys, but there's so much else going on that you really should watch. And the tragedy in Sicily, in Italy, Nescemi, it's not Etna this time, but a whole town, close to 26,000 residents. The whole thing might come down the mountain, and we have every day is this thing progressing, and now new buildings are hanging in the air, going down into the abyss. So check it out, new images. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Bye bye.